Hey guys, welcome back to Wrestling News 365. Hope everyone is doing very well. As always, there is a ton of news stories to get into today. So let's start off talking about the WWE Draft, because WWE reportedly does have big plans for the superstars who will be switching brands in the 2021 WWE Draft. Now, WWE is set for somewhat of a reset after the SummerSlam pay-per-view on August 21st, as the draft will begin just over 1 week later. Now, Andrew Zarian of the Mat Men podcast has reported that WWE has big plans in the work for some wrestlers who will be switching brands this year. Now, regarding the WWE Draft, it has also been noted that the goal is to give this year's draft a bigger feel than previous years for obvious reasons, such as to boost the ratings and give fresh storylines and opponents for the respective brands. Now, it was noted that this will be a unique opportunity to hit the reset button on a lot of wrestlers, as the draft typically provides. It was noted earlier this week there have been plenty of talk about possibly sending Big E back to Monday Night Raw from Friday Night SmackDown, which would essentially put the New Day back together, but Big E would remain as a singles wrestler. Now, the 2021 WWE Draft will reportedly begin with the August 30th Monday Night Raw from the Chesapeake Energy Arena in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma, then wrap up on the September 3rd edition of SmackDown from the ViStar Veterans Memorial Arena in Jacksonville, Florida. There's no word yet on if there's going to be a supplemental draft online this year or trades or anything like that, but that's also very likely too. So when it comes to this, it's more of the same, frankly, when it comes to the draft. I don't know if it's massive breaking news that WWE are going to use the draft for a reset this year. They need it. They need it. That's the obvious thing. I find it, staggering though that we have a draft every year at this point, and it's around, and this year's draft actually is earlier than it was last year. Last year's draft was in October, of course. Obviously, it was delayed because of the pandemic. The plan was to have it after WrestleMania, but it got delayed and delayed and delayed and delayed because of the pandemic, like everything did last year. But does no one think, and this is my always thing, I think with the draft, everyone loves the draft. As a kid growing up and even now, the draft episode is a big episode, and people are excited about the draft because it gives you an insight to really what WWE is thinking at that period of time. If you really want to know who is on those internal lists as like the top baby faces and the top heels in WWE, and plans for upcoming pushes and plans for new superstars that are going to be featured and all that kind of stuff, the draft is an excellent insight to all of that. It truly is. But my concern would be, if I was a WWE official, or if I'm someone inside WWE or whatever, my concern would be about all of this would be, we did a draft in October last year, and that was a big reset. That was the big reset. It was the draft, was the Thunderdome, was this renewed focus on all of these storylines. We're not even 12 months later, and we already need a big reset. What does that say? What does that say about the planning? What does that say about the booking and the creative? It says that it's bad, ultimately, that it says. If you can do a draft in October last year, and by June you're going, oh, we need to refresh these rosters. These rosters are completely imbalanced. These storylines are way off. All this kind of stuff. That says that there's a lot wrong going on in terms of booking, creative, and I guess in terms of the releasing of talent. Because when they drafted these respective rosters last year for Raw, for SmackDown, they didn't think that a ton of WWE superstars were going to get released. Maybe they thought that would be the case for, say, April after WrestleMania, but I don't think they thought it was going to continue for May and June as well, which of course it has done. So we are looking at a situation right now where the rosters are really imbalanced. Certainly, if you look at SmackDown, how many females have they got on that show? Hardly any. If you look at Monday Night Raw, how many credible challenges do you have for Bobby Lashley's WWE Championship? Not many. There are so many different aspects of Raw and SmackDown you can pick apart and say they're missing all of these people. They're imbalanced, or they don't have enough people. They've got too many people, and stuff does need to be moved around. Now, that report didn't mention if NXT was to be involved in that draft. Logic would suggest that it is. I think it has to be. Again, considering the amount of losses we've seen to Raw and SmackDown in terms of the releases and talent departures, logic would suggest they need bodies and they need new names. I mentioned it with Monday Night Raw. Bobby Lashley and the WWE Championship picture needs credible opponents on Monday Night Raw. Looking at the SmackDown brand, who can they bring over to facilitate that? Big E. I mean, the list isn't ginormous. Maybe a Kevin Owens. But again, the list isn't huge. And then that's when you have to start looking at NXT going, well, we got to bring some people up. Whether it's Karrion Kross, whether it's Bronson Reed, as they've had their tryouts recently. We'll touch on Karrion Kross in a second. But whether it's Adam Cole, whether it's whoever, they need to start calling some names up. And I know there is the hesitancy, certainly from pro wrestling fans in general, certainly NXT fans, because we've seen what happens when you get called up from NXT to Raw or SmackDown. You get changed, and most of the time not for the better, and that is a concern. And I wouldn't be surprised if there's plenty of NXT superstars on that black and gold brand right now that are hesitant, and they're saying, you know what, why would I want to go up to Raw or SmackDown? Because it doesn't look like it's going to be any more beneficial for me than being on NXT. Yes, I might get paid more, but we don't even know if that's the case right now, given, the financial situation. WWE's making a lot of money, but there was talents that were getting called up from NXT to Raw and SmackDown last year that weren't getting new contracts. They weren't getting, main roster deals in comparison to the NXT deal. So we don't know, again, how all of that works. So the draft, of course, is needed. The draft, of course, is needed as a big reset and as a refresh for WWE. There's no doubt about that. And it will hopefully deliver good ratings in terms of the television ratings for the USA Network and Fox. And I'm sure that the respective networks will be happy with a special themed episode, which we've seen that they want more of going forward later this year. But it should open eyes, I think. It should open eyes for the WWE officials to say, well, we're doing this earlier than we did it last year. And once again, for the however many year in a row, we're having to do a reset. We've seen this so many years at this point. We saw it last year. We've got to do a big reset, big reset, Thunderdome, draft. 2019, we're going to Premiere Week, whereas Premiere Week, wasn't it? It was going to be Premiere, Monday Night Raw, USA Network, and SmackDown's Premiere on Fox, followed by a draft, a big reset. The prior year, at the end of 2018, we're getting the McMahon family come out on Monday Night Raw and say, we haven't been doing our job properly because next year is going to be a big reset. And that was determined to be a big reset. That's when they called up Aleister Black and Ricochet and Tommaso Ciampa and Johnny Gargano and all of these NXT names. They did all of that because that was a big reset. Every time they do a big reset, and it hasn't worked. Every single year, they still need to do a big reset because despite the big reset, they find a way of screwing it up. Which again implies there is something fundamentally wrong with that creative process because they can't get it right. They just can't get it right. Why? I don't know, because they can't help themselves. The structure's wrong. That pyramid is so convoluted and the bureaucracy is so, thick at this point. I don't know. I don't work there. But from an outsider looking in, if you're having to do a draft every year, not just to pop ratings, but also because the rosters are completely out of whack, it says quite a lot. It says quite a lot about the inner workings of the WWE right now. Now, speaking of the inner workings, this has been a really big story. It's about a new writer and suggesting that she didn't need to know anything about WWE to work for the company or to get her foot in the door for a writing role. Now, this is a story that has got a lot of people upset, to say the least, on social media. Now, new WWE creative writer Kenice Mobley appeared on the Asian Not Asian podcast this week and talked about getting hired by WWE. Mobley took to Instagram back on June 3rd and posted a selfie to announce her new position with the company. She wrote, quote, "This is my bed, which I'll be spending a lot less time in because later this month I start a writing job with WWE." Now, Mobley is an active stand-up comedian and has been featured on Stand Up NBC, Vice and Vice News, The Tonight Show, the 2020 Bet Awards, and more. She revealed that WWE did not require her to know anything about wrestling, but that's not too much of a surprise considering WWE's job listings as what we've seen in the past. A current job listing for WWE writer has, quote, "understanding of WWE's audience, brackets demographic and psychographic." Oh, psychographic. A plus, but not required, as one of the qualifications for the role. And another related qualification is, quote, "professional TV staff experience in drama and comedy is a plus, but an understanding of pro wrestling is not required." So this is what she said on the podcast, quote, "Yes, I have just been hired by WWE. Given the things you know about me and my entire life and what I'm into, yes, that's surprising. Yes, also a surprise for me. They did not require me to know anything about wrestling, but I do have a background in film production and comedy writing, and they're like, perfect, come in." Now, Mobley noted that she's working on the Raw writing team, but as of the podcast release date, which was Monday, June 7, she had not started her position yet, and she mentioned WWE champion Bobby Lashley on the red brand. This is certainly the comments that's got a lot of people angry, shall we say. She said, quote, "So I'm on the Monday Night Raw team, so there's Monday Night Raw and Friday Night SmackDown, and the people I know that are on it are Bobby, His name is either Bobby Ashley or Bobby Lashley, and I really should know that. He's like this giant black guy, and the people who are part of his crew, I know they call, or at least as of last year, they called themselves the Hurt Business. The Hurt Business. They wear suits, and they're like, we're cool. Look, okay, and she carries on talking about the rest of the stuff, but they're the comments that have got people upset. Look, I see both sides of the argument to this one. I really do. I really do see both sides of the arguments. I've started in jobs before that I had no experience going in. A little story about myself. I started work for a major cosmetic company right out of university in marketing, and I'd never done marketing before in my life. As an internship in that company, I did recruitment. I did HR and recruitment, and I was accepted into a graduate position doing marketing, and I had no marketing experience. So I do relate to that. I certainly do relate to that story that she's saying there, because just because you don't have experience of that role doesn't mean you won't be good at it. So I do genuinely really understand that. However, when I was going into that role, I had a wide knowledge of the company because I'd worked there for over a year at that point, and I knew the brand that I was working on, and I knew the products that I was working with. And that's where I say that's not the best comment to make. And the Wrestling Observer newsletter, as I'm recording right now, is just being released. From what I can see, Dave Meltzer is reporting that there is some heat on this new writer backstage because of the comments about Bobby Lashley, because I think the concern is if you've got someone, this new writer, publicly saying, I don't even know who the WWE champion is. Writers in Hollywood go from show to show to show to different talk shows to scripted comedy shows, just to scripted shows, to dramas, to reality shows, whatever. Writers bounce from every show and they don't need to know a ton about the product. That's true, but you do have to know the characters before you start writing. I don't have an issue at all. I really don't have an issue at all in someone coming in and saying, look, I don't know anything about WWE, but I'm willing to learn, I'm willing to find out. We have that with pro wrestlers all the time. Pro wrestlers come into the performance center and they don't know pro wrestling, they don't know WWE, but the coaches there say, look, we think you've got the tools to succeed. If we can teach you pro wrestling, if we can teach you about the industry, if we can teach you how to wrestle, we think you'll be good. The same applies to a writer. If they might not have any knowledge of WWE, but they come in and the people that work with them say, look, we like the way you write content. We like your comedy. We like the way you put storylines together. We like the way you put all of these packages together. We like your writing style. If we feel like if you get familiar with the characters on our show, if you get familiar with the product, then yes, you can be an asset. You can be an asset. I think what is upsetting people is the way that this has been phrased. I think that's what really upsets people is the way that this has been phrased of her going, well, I don't know Bobby Lashley and it doesn't matter. And it kind of sounded a bit trivial. I think the way that she said this sounded a bit trivial. And I think that's the thing that's upset people. And again, people are upset going, well, this is the problem with WWE. You've got non-wrestling people writing the programming. You've got non-wrestling people coming in and no WWE fans are coming into this company, blah, blah, blah. And it's this weird thing about pro wrestling fans. We're such a fraternity at this point that we don't like outsiders. We don't like outsiders coming in. If you're not a wrestling fan, we don't like you. We don't like you. You can't come in and do what I like. And we do it with athletes. We do it with celebrities. But initially, look at the heat Bad Bunny got on social media early this year. Oh my, just another celebrity coming in from WrestleMania, taking in the spots, and then they find out he's a WWE fan. It's, well, yeah, maybe, okay, we like him now. They do it all the time. We don't like outsiders. Tyson Fury wrestles Braun Strowman at Crown Jewel 2019. There's another boxer coming in. And I hate when these celebrities and athletes come in and they're outside. They don't know the company. They don't respect the company. And it's the same here. It's the same social media, just being upset for the sake of being upset. It's an outsider coming in. They don't know WWE. They don't like WWE. Then why on earth would WWE hire them? You don't have to. You don't. In a lot of jobs, when you're working for, a supermarket around the corner, you don't have to know of them. You don't have to know of them because you can learn. You can learn. If you're a writer and they're hiring for a writing position, if WWE's only going to hire WWE fans, they're going to run out of writers pretty quickly, right? Because people don't watch the product anymore. They're going from a very small pool of people if that's the case. They're going to go out of business if they're only hiring WWE fans. It's business at the end of the day. It's a writing position. They're hiring a writer. Now, if she comes in and before she starts, she doesn't familiarize herself with the product, and she doesn't, while she's working there, doesn't familiarize herself with the product, she's not going to last that long because she'll get laughed out of the writing room, and that will be on her. But as fans on social media, you can't criticize her for not knowing anything about the product and applying for a writing job. That's what it is. It's a writer applying for a writing job. Now, again, if she doesn't familiarize herself with the product, then that's her problem. That's on her, and she won't last that long. But to get upset that WWE is hiring writers for a writing position and that they're not WWE fans, again, if you're getting angry that they're not hiring WWE fans, there aren't many. There aren't many. Look at the ratings. Certainly, there aren't many that are in writing positions. And then they'll go, well, they could hire me. Oh, yeah. Okay, well, hire you, random guy on social media. And then their response will be, well, at least I know something about the product. Yeah, but it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. They're not looking for that. They're not looking for that. That's not her fault. If you're upset on what WWE's hiring practices are, put your anger towards WWE. Don't put it towards this poor woman that's just got this barrage of abuse for not knowing Bobby Lashley. It doesn't look good. I'll be honest. It doesn't look good. And she should know the WWE champion. But that's WWE. That's how WWE runs. I mentioned it earlier about the draft. That's the corporate bureaucracy and how they create television. They have these big writing teams. They like to consider themselves like a late night show or like any television show where you've got the writing room and all this kind of stuff. They like it. That's what they like to do. That's how WWE like to portray themselves as. They don't like to use the word wrestling. For a company that doesn't like to use the word wrestling, we shouldn't get angry when they don't hire wrestling people. Again, it's angry for the sake of being angry. Personally, that's where I look at it. Again, I don't think it's her fault for being a writer and applying for a writing position. It's up to her now to familiarize herself with the product. We were all praising the Otis and Mandy Rose storyline. Was it last year? And the writer that came up with that, I don't think she had a pro wrestling background. She got released, and then people were in uproar. I can't believe they released her. Oh, what a great writer, and she came up with a great storyline. I think she had a background in comedy as well. She didn't know anything about WWE. She had a background in television. We were all very happy with that storyline, weren't we? Very happy with that one. So give her time. Give her time. She hasn't even started yet. And we're already trying to sort of heckle her out of pro wrestling because the angry pro wrestling mob is onto something different. Going after those non-wrestling fans once again. Let's stop being so fraternal and give people a chance. Right? And if you're going to be angry at anyone, be angry at WWE for their hiring practices. Not the person that applied and got a job, especially in this current climate. It's just crazy. It really is crazy. Now, Karrion Kross obviously made his main roster a guest debut this week on Main Event. And it got, obviously, we spoke about this yesterday, but the footage of it went on social media yesterday, which has subsequently been pulled, which is rare. WWE doesn't really tend to pull like clips and stuff like that from social media in terms of copyright, but they have, which is, I think is a really telling story there. But obviously, people were interested to see if the unique entrance that Karrion Kross has in NXT would translate to the main roster. Would he have Scarlett? Would he have the black and white entrance? All that kind of stuff. Would that be Karrion Kross? The answer is no, because the unique entrance of WWE NXT champion Karrion Kross, which is usually a highlight of his weekly NXT TV appearances, was somewhat stripped down inside the WWE Thunderdome this week. Now, like I mentioned, it was posted on Twitter, a video of Kross making his entrance on this week's main event. Kross headlined the episode in a match against Shelton Benjamin. The entrance is missing one of the better parts of Karrion Kross's gimmick, that being Scarlett, and some of the other special effects used on NXT. Now, there's no word yet on why Scarlett did not accompany Kross to the ring for the main event match. There are reports of Scarlett receiving her own WWE tryout at Friday's SmackDown taping. I posted this on Twitter yesterday, and I'm not going to get too overly worried and concerned. I think that if you're going to get really upset and angry, this is WWE's example of ruining Karrion Kross. So they're not even using Karrion Kross. Look at he's got a terrible entrance. He doesn't have Scarlett. What I would say is that its main event, it was largely just a tryout match, obviously for Vince McMahon. I believe Aleister Black had a similar main event match before he even came up to the main roster. You could argue, look how that ended up. But Aleister Black had the same. I would assume it's just Vince McMahon or whatever wanting to get a better look at him. I don't think you can read too much into it. I think the one thing you can read into is Scarlett not being with him. I think the whole thing about the entrance and all that kind of stuff, that'll be worked out over time. I think WWE is very, very particular about the entrance. They have hour-long walkthroughs, figuring out entrances, figuring out graphics, figuring out where to stand. They're very premeditated when it comes to all of that. So maybe they just didn't have time, or maybe they just didn't think it was important. It's main event. Who cares? Who watches that show anyway? If it wasn't for Karrion Kross and Bronson Reed this week, nobody would have watched it. So it doesn't matter. I think the thing you can read into is Scarlett not being there. And as I mentioned before, that's alarm bells for me. That is alarm bells being rung, because that implies to me that maybe Vince McMahon or Bruce Pritchard have seen something and they've gone, whoa, Karrion Kross is good, but that's Scarlett, she's the star. And they've done that before, whether it's Sable, whether it's Lana, whether it's whoever. They realize, they think, Scarlett, she's a star, she's a star. And she might be. Totally, she might be. She's absolutely got something about her. There's no doubt about that. But right now, to split Scarlett and Karrion Kross up is way, way premature. They're not even on the main roster yet. Give them a chance first. Let them be together at least for 6 months or a year on the main roster. Then you can decide that, she's a star and then move her off and do your Vince McMahon-isms. But now's not the time. They haven't even been up on the main roster as of yet. They've only been in NXT for about a year. And you're already looking going, she's a star. I just don't get that. So it's interesting. And again, I find it fascinating that there's been a copyright claim, because WWE never does that. So obviously they weren't happy with either the criticism they were getting or just people seeing that footage in general, which is bizarre. It's on Hulu. It's out there. But I guess it is what it is. Clash of Champions. We have a date and a location reportedly for Clash of Champions this year. And WWE is returning to Boston, Massachusetts and Columbus, Ohio in September. It was reported by PW Insider that the 2021 Clash of Champions pay-per-view will be held on September 26th from the Nationwide Arena in Columbus. The 2020 Clash of Champions event, of course, took place in the Thunderdome at the Amway Center in Orlando. But the 2019 show took place in Charlotte, while the 2017 show was held in Boston, and the 2016 show took place in Indianapolis. It was also reported that WWE will return to the TD Garden in Boston, Massachusetts for a live Raw taping on September 13th. So the dates are continued to be added to WWE's schedule for the remainder of the year. So there you go. Clash of Champions is going to be held on September 26th from the Nationwide Arena in Columbus, Ohio. It almost feels strange to look that far ahead, doesn't it, at this point? Because knowing what's coming, it's July and the return to touring and SummerSlam and all that kind of stuff, it feels crazy. But we have a date and location for Clash of Champions. I think that's probably the only thing that's been planned for Clash of Champions right now. That hasn't even entered the mind of WWE. So if you see any advertisement for that, don't pay any attention to them, frankly. Speaking of new dates and new locations, WWE is reportedly returning to Madison Square Garden this year. WWE is reportedly returning to the legendary MSG later this year. It was reported yesterday by PW Insider that WWE will return to the world's most famous arena on Friday, September 10, for a live episode of SmackDown on Fox. There's no word yet on when tickets will go on sale, but of course, once they will, we'll mention it here on the channel. WWE is yet to actually officially announce this, it must be said. It was recently reported that WWE had multiple holds on potential dates at the Garden over the next year, but nothing was set in stone as of last week. Now the September 10 date has been locked in. WWE usually runs MSG for their annual post-Christmas non-televised event on December 26th, but it remains to be seen if they're going to do the same this year as well. That's a big deal. It's a big deal. WWE doesn't run many live televised events in the Garden anymore because it costs too much. WWE's new home in New York is Brooklyn. And it's reported as well that Survivor Series this year is going to be held in the Barclays Center in Brooklyn, New York. So it's interesting. I know some people have drawn comparisons and said, look, see, this is in September. AEW last week, they announced their big Grand Slam edition of Dynamite in Arthur Ashe Stadium. WWE being reactive. From what we've seen on social media, I think Andrew Zarian of the Mat Man podcast reported this, and as that report said, they had multiple dates locked in throughout the entirety of the year. WWE was always going to run the Garden in the fall this year. They were always going to do that, so I don't think Dynamite this time, sometimes Dynamite does have a bearing on WWE, but this time it really had no bearing on WWE. I'm glad to see WWE going back to doing live TV inside MSG. I think that's the right thing. They did it in 2019. They had those back-to-back nights inside the Garden for Raw and SmackDown. Raw had Steve Austin, SmackDown had The Undertaker. Obviously, they couldn't do last year because of the pandemic. So, great to see WWE back in the Garden. WWE Madison Square Garden, the amount of events and iconic moments there, it's endless. WrestleMania was born there, and Vincent J. McMahon and all the McMahons are promoted there. It's WWE's home. So for the last few years, for them not to be really going in there because the rent is extortionate. Something like the rent is like 2 or 3 times what it is to run the Barclays Center in Brooklyn. It's crazy. And it's a shame. But WWE, look, money talks at the end of the day. So it's good to see that they're going back, and it'll make that edition of SmackDown very big. So that's very exciting. And everyone loves an MSG show for WWE, right? Finally, Titus ONeil has commented on Hulk Hogan getting some boos at WrestleMania 36 this year, which was certainly very interesting. Of course, Hogan and Titus ONeil hosted both nights of WrestleMania 37 this year, and every time Hulk Hogan spoke, he got booed out of the stadium. And it was certainly, I think, surprising, certainly, because that was Hulk Hogan's hometown, and I think WWE felt that that was a safe space for Hogan to host with Titus ONeil without fan backlash, but fans didn't care. They booed Hogan regardless, and Titus ONeil did admit that this reaction by the fans certainly took him by surprise. He said, quote, "I didn't expect the reaction that he got. I didn't expect the reaction that he received. I expected a little bit here and there, but nowhere near where it was. But at the end of the day, to Hulk's credit, he took it with pride, and the show went on." Took it with pride? It took on being booed for being racist with pride. I don't know if that's the right necessarily words to use there. But regardless of any assumed tension, ONeil said he holds no grudge against the WWE Hall of Famer. He said, quote, "A lot of people on social media said hats off to you, man, for working and being professional and working with Hulk, and that we know what you said in public. I meant everything that I wrote, but at the end of the day, I don't harbor any hard feelings or against anybody. I think that's his cross to bear. My job is to be professional and make the best product possible for whatever I'm giving." I think we did that. I had a lot of fun. We dressed up as pirates. It was very hot, but it was very fun. I got a chance to do it at home. I will do it 10 times out of 10 alongside Hulk Hogan if asked, if I had the opportunity. So Titus ONeil obviously was one of those people that was very outspoken about bringing Hogan back to the company when he first came back for his apology or lack of apology. Subsequently, again, I guess he's worked with Hogan. He's spoken to him personally, and he's accepted his apology, I guess, and he's moved on. I don't know. I don't know. I suppose the difficult thing for Titus is that he is still an ambassador of WWE, and he still just has to walk the corporate line, I guess. But, you know, I applaud those people that booed Hulk Hogan earlier this year. Look, you can't. This isn't like the early 2000s or the late 90s where stuff you've done in the past or stuff you've said, it can't run away from you. And Hogan, has he apologized? I think it's debatable. I think that one still is very, very debatable. There is certainly different ways of apologizing. There's apologizing for what you said and saying that it was wrong and I don't know what came over me and it was in a private space and I still shouldn't have said it. It was disgusting and I regret it every single day of my life, and that isn't me. That isn't in my character, and I'm genuinely sorry. I know it's going to be difficult to forgive me, but I hope you can. That's an apology, not of, I didn't know I was being recorded, I'm sorry I got caught. That's different. That's a lot different. That's not really showing a lot of remorse. And I think that's where people really, truly have the problem. Of course, people have an issue with what he said, and some people can't forgive him for that. And that's totally fine. That's justifiable. But I think where a lot of people have an issue with is that there is no remorse. There is not a lot of remorse. The only remorse is for himself. And I think that's the big problem there. But look, guys, as always, this is just one man's opinion. What are your thoughts on all of these WWE news stories we've spoken about today? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. I'll do my best to respond and reply to all of your comments. Really enjoy interacting with you guys, talking about WWE, AEW, Impact Wrestling, New Japan Pro Wrestling, all things pro wrestling here on the channel. So be sure to get involved in the community, drop a comment below. All opinions are welcome. If you have enjoyed this video, please do smash a like on the like button too. Really does help us out here on YouTube, get the rankings, and get into people's recommendation feeds if they haven't seen our videos previously. But most importantly, if you haven't already, please do subscribe to Wrestle News 365. You can do that by clicking the bottom right-hand corner of the screen right now, or if you wait a few seconds, there'll be a subscribe button at the end of this video, along with another video for you to watch. Thank you very much for watching, listening, streaming, or have you come across this video today, and I'll speak to you again very, very soon.
Hey guys, thank you for watching, listening, streaming, or however you come across this video today. Be sure to click on the video on the right there to watch our next video, or click the bottom there to subscribe, or the bottom right hand corner. Thank you very much, and I'll speak to you again very soon.